Lots of people say that the power behind the throne, the people who really run things, whomever they are into weird sorts of things, and sometimes the accusation is leveled that they're into numerology. And it didn't escape me that, it was 11 years exactly from the time that George Bush Sr. declared a New World Order. This was leading up to the war, the first Gulf War against Iraq. And he gave a speech, and I believe it was on 9/11, so that would be 1990, I think. Anyway, it was exactly 11 years, and then 9/11 happened. Some say that 11 is especially a number that is important to the elite, to those who rule in numerology, and others will say there's many numbers that are important as well. And there are those who make all kinds of claims about the people who run things, being interested in all kinds of occultish, I suppose you could say, ideas. There are a lot of people right now who are worried that something might happen, might be planned even, if you can believe that, for the Olympic Games. I hope that's not the case. But whatever the case is, I see mainstream news stories of how London is quite, for lack of a better word, militarized. And this is all being done around the games. But we have to keep in mind that this idea of the security state, the beginning of Homeland Security, and all these sorts of things in the West does sort of coincide, as James Petrus pointed out in a recent article, I think over at Axis of Logic. Maybe it's at Global Research as well, I don't know. It coincides with the economic decline, the economic destruction of the middle class in the West. And he would argue that the professors that sit around in their universities and sort of point the finger and say, oh, what a terrible thing that globalization has been, and what a terrible thing has happened, and the loss of the welfare state, as some would call it, the loss of our standard of living. And these same people, he would claim, James Petrus would claim, do not realize that they are in part responsible because they didn't realize that the so-called, he uses the word Stalinists, and there were a lot of people who were so-called leftists but denounced the communists, the Russians, the Soviets, whatever you want to call them. His argument would be that the Soviets gave a great opening to the West for people to make demands and to operate because, from his point of view, the West was in competition to show the world and to show their own people that the capitalist, quote-unquote, capitalist system really does work and really can provide for the people. And he would say that the fall of the collapse, or so-called collapse. Some people would say that they did it on purpose. They wanted to downsize on purpose. It was Gorbachev who made that decision, which many Russians to this day are unhappy, and there seems to be a resurgence of the Communist Party in Russia, in fact. So he would say that it had more to do with the fact of the Russian Soviet communism existing at the time. And if you look at the decline in the standard of living, about the time that it started to happen, it was really under Reagan, during sort of detente, during sort of as the Soviet Union was in decline, and we were getting involved with in Afghanistan, covertly causing trouble for the Russians. The Russians were in Afghanistan. And he would argue that when they finally gave up their Soviet empire and the Soviet system, and then everyone became so-called capitalists, and the looting began of the East, and many were driven into poverty. And this is pretty much standard. Everyone knows that that's what happened with the fall of whatever you think of communism. That a lot of people fell into poverty. That he would think that some of these professors would see what had happened. So it wouldn't surprise me if our rulers thought numbers were important, but it also doesn't surprise me that that they have to find ways to bring about sort of a it's like the stick and the carrot. And now they have to bring out the stick because they are out of carrots, for one thing, and they have no inclination to use the carrot. And I suppose Petrus's whole argument sort of relies on a yin and yang, a balance in the world type thing. And we see, since the fall of the Soviet Union, and even before that, the slashing of the social welfare budgets, the austerity, the decline of America and the West. While at the same time, Paul Craig Roberts, conservative, writes this article that, at least on paper, he claims, the Chinese have more rights than than Americans, because of all the laws that they've enacted. Whether they intend to use them or not is a different question. The NDAA and so forth. So this is rather tangential, but at the same time it all ties together. Perhaps it's just a class struggle, as Petrus would have us believe. Perhaps there's a ruling priesthood that is inclined to, and perhaps there are several different groups battling it out. That's what some would argue. But at any rate, this ruling priesthood is inclined to use events or make events to control the masses. That's the argument that is sometimes made. Nonetheless, I did find it very odd when I thought about it. And I wonder how many cycles of 11 there are. The most obvious is George H.W. Bush's speech of a new world order, and then exactly 11 years later, the terrible tragedy of the infamous 9/11 in America. But who knows?